Last month's explosion at this Constantinides power plant on 31st Street and 20th Avenue in Astoria, which caused the New York sky to turn blue, was the focus of a press conference held on Monday, January 7th by Councilmember Constantinides, chair of the Committee on Environmental Protection. The councilman, who is an avid advocate for the implementation of cleaner and greener energy resources in his 22nd district and throughout the city of New York, discussed his new legislation, which requires the city of New York to assess the feasibility of replacing the 21 gas-fired plants in western Queens with batteries that store energy from wind, solar, and other renewable sources. The report also requires a 2030 energy storage goal and implementation plan.
That stuff is going right into the lungs.
Western Queens produces 50% of the city's power, while residential communities such as Astoria have a higher volume of pollutants than any other area borough-wide and citywide. Traditionally, Astoria is a neighborhood with the highest rates of residents suffering with respiratory illnesses, including asthma, due to the high number of polluting-emitting power plants which operate in residential areas. New York has generated power at the expense of Astoria residents for long enough, the councilman stressed, adding that, quote, "It is nonsense that in 2019 we still have power plants in residential neighborhoods." Referring to the December 27 explosion at this power plant, Mr. Constantinides referred to the grave concern of many citizens who at the time, as he noted, were wondering whether it was a terror attack or an explosion that might have toxic repercussions on air. At a time when we're trying to shed our reliance on fossil fuels, it is crucial we target the low-hanging fruit like our secondary plants in favor of renewable alternatives, the councilman further stressed. The December 27 explosion at this Constantinides power plant, which alarmed not only the residents of Astoria, but all New Yorkers, many of whom even thought that the city was attacked by aliens, luckily did not cause any environmental risks or injuries. The press conference was also attended and addressed by State Senator Jessica Ramos, Marie Tornelli, chair of Community Board 1 in Queens, Claudia Cocker, president of the Astoria Houses Residents Association, representatives from environmental organizations, and activists for cleaner energy. State Senator Jessica Ramos, who represents the 13th District, pledged her full support to Councilmember Constantinides and to his effort to implement his new legislation, stressing that the bill, which calls for an investigation which aims the closing of gas-powered plants, is, quote, an important first step in questioning our dependence on dirty energy and toward creating a cleaner, safer, more sustainable New York, end quote. Ms. Ramos also pledged to work tirelessly in the state Senate to further push for cleaner and greener energy resources and thus make the New York State the leader in green energy. Marie Tornelli, chair of Community Board 1 in Queens, in welcoming the new bill introduced by Councilmember Constantinides, stressed that, quote, if there's a possibility that the power plants can be replaced with batteries that store energy, a feasibility study is imperative. Astorians have bared the burden of these plans too long, end quote. Claudia Cocker, president of the Astoria Houses Residents Association, also welcomed the councilman's new bill, stressing that the Astoria residents who live near the power plants and who have been suffering with all sorts of respiratory illnesses and asthma are very thankful to Mr. Constantinides for his strong commitment for cleaner air and for always keeping his promises to make their lives better. All other speakers spoke in the same spirit. The legislation put forth by Councilmember Constantinides represents a broader push to make New York City's electric grid greener and is in the spirit of Governor Andrew Cuomo's recent pledge to make the state grid carbon neutral by 2040. In December 2017, the City Council overwhelmingly passed a bill requiring plants stop using the dirtiest fuel oils as soon as 2022, which will significantly improve air quality in surrounding communities. Costa, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Elena. Great to see you.
And here we are again, beginning of the year, and we're fighting the environment and this famous plant here in Astoria. So, you're introducing a bill, and you're going to have also a hearing to investigate what had happened during the explosion, right?
Yeah, I mean, that explosion was really scary stuff. I mean, anyone who lived in Astoria, anyone who, people could see it from Long Island.
I know.
But if you lived here in Astoria, I mean, it was a frightening night. I mean, you saw, buildings shook, that you didn't know what that light, you didn't know, you smelled burning rubber in the air. You didn't know if it was safe to go outside, if it was safe to breathe, what was going on, what the air quality was. It was a very frightening night, and thank God no one was hurt. Thank God no one's property or anyone was injured. But what happens next time?
Yeah.
It's time for a new shift.
But also, we don't know what was released in the air during that explosion and during every explosion that happens here in Astoria.
Yeah, I mean, they said this is commonplace. It was only that the clouds being where it was that turned on the blue light. But this is just a spotlight on a larger issue, which is we're breathing this stuff every single day.
Yes.
And all of that, all these power plants that are in our neighborhood, we breathe that air. We breathe the stuff that's going to make our lungs, cause us asthma, make us sicker. And then fighting big picture climate change, they're going to make our planet sicker and create a larger challenge for us in the future.
Yes. So can you tell me a little bit more about the bill that you're introducing and the fight that you're going to launch? Because it's going to be a long fight. It's not going to be an easy fight.
Oh, no, nothing worth doing is ever easy.
Yeah.
February 11th, we're going to have a hearing in the City Council, not only on the Con Ed explosion, but on greening our grid, forcing the city to come up with a plan. They'd have to issue a report by the end of this year on how we close the gas and petroleum-powered power plants in New York City. They'd have to do that by solar and wind and battery storage on those renewables. So it's time for us to take the really tough stance of we need to really not only talk about greening the grid, but draw a map on how we get there.
Right. And we talked about this before. In Greece and in Cyprus, there have been solar for decades. And it's a shame that here in this country, the most progressive country in the world, we're still like in the dark ages.
We have to move forward. Like, we should be the leaders. We should be the international leaders. And we're, because of, complacency and other issues, we're not where we need to be. Donald Trump may love power plants, but we don't, because we breathe in the pollution from it every single day. It's making us sick. It's time for a change.
Yes. Anything else you're working on? It's the beginning of the year, I know.
We're going to have our big State of the District speech on January 31st. It's an opportunity for us to talk about the things that we've accomplished over the last year and to think about our future of our community, not just on the environment, but our schools, our parks, everything going on in Astoria at PS2.
Okay.
So
we'll see you then.
See you then. I look forward to it.
And finally, a special greeting for the new year.
Everyone, I hope everyone had a happy and healthy holiday season. And I wish everyone a blessed, healthy, happy 2019. And look forward to a great year, and especially with AKTINA TV and radio.
Thank you, Costa. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena.
Senator,
yes,
it's a great pleasure to meet you, and thank you for the great work that you're doing up in Albany and for your commitment to get rid of these power plants. As I mentioned to you earlier, when we started AKTINA TV in 2002, our first story was this power plant, and so many years later, we're still fighting to shut it down. So your thoughts?
Yeah, the problem is that every time that we, suffer an incident, we're reminded about how bad it is to live near these power plants that pollute our air. Asthma rates here in Astoria are very high, and we know that climate change and everything that's happening globally is something that we really, really need to address. We can't continue to depend on dirty energy, on gas-powered plants to produce our energy for the city of New York. 55% of the electricity in New York City is produced right here in Astoria. And unfortunately, of course, because we're burning fossil fuels, all of those pollutants go into our air, and that's the air that our parents breathe, our grandparents breathe, our children breathe, our pets breathe, right? So we want to make sure that we are doing right by each other, and that is making sure that we're moving towards 100% renewable energy in New York.
And the council member is introducing a bill in the city council on behalf of the city of New York. And what are your plans up in Albany?
We are working right now to figure out how we can amend state regulations in order to make sure that not only we're supporting Costa's effort, but to make sure we're accelerating the process towards 100% renewable energy across the state at a much faster pace.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a difficult task, taking into consideration politics and all of that. But any final thoughts?
It'll be a difficult task, but there is a lot of political will, especially after the last election. I think New Yorkers understand more and more every day how important it is that we fight climate change, or else we're going to completely ruin our planet, because that's what we've been doing for such a long time. So this is something that's very urgent, and it's something that politics actually shouldn't play a role in, right? Climate change is real. The science is there. We have the data. Now we just have to tackle the problem as soon as possible in the best possible way.
And finally, we're at the beginning of the year. What is your message?
Well, I just want to wish everybody, and especially all of your viewers, a very happy new year. I hope that everybody is healthy and safe and that they have a very productive year. Just please, stay paying attention to the news and stay involved in your community.
Thank you, Senator.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Patrick, your thoughts about today's gathering here?
I think it's good. Now, the reason for the gathering is disappointing. There was the explosion of the transformer, as many people saw, the green sky in New York City. But today's meeting, or today's press conference here, the council member, Constantinides, is talking about how can we avoid risks like this in the future. How in the future can we move to cleaner forms of energy where we're not so reliant on dirty fossil fuels, and instead powering our city, powering our buildings, powering our homes and our offices with clean, renewable energy. Yeah. And so at New York Communities for Change, we fight on a lot of issues of climate justice, a lot of issues of social justice.
You want to share some of your cause?
Sure. So one of them is the Dirty Buildings campaign. So this was referred to just today by Constantinides because he is the bill sponsor on a package that we've been working together with him on for a while. And so that's to cut pollution from the city's largest source of pollution, climate pollution, which is large buildings, which are buildings in this city responsible for 70% of climate pollution. Large buildings responsible for nearly half of that 70%. Intro 1253, introduced in the council by Constantinides, is a strong package that drastically cuts that pollution, creates thousands of jobs in the process, and can really help move this city the way it needs to towards clean energy. A lot of that will be through retrofits. So the exciting thing about today was, while we're doing retrofits to large buildings to make them more energy efficient, to make them even cheaper energy bills in some cases, we also need to be making sure our grid is greener. Right. And so that's what today was about. How are we going to get these 24 power plants in the city to shift over to clean energy?
Yeah, it's going to be a long road to victory, but, I think with everybody's involvement, we're going to make it.
Exactly. I think so. With everybody, like the council member said, thinking of how can we change the paradigm? And how can we move as aggressively and quickly as possible to address this crisis to which New York City is extremely vulnerable?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Sure thing. Thank you.